Hello, today we are going to format a USB stick from the Windows command line. So let's insert the USB stick. So it appears as two drives, USB drive F, USB drive G, which we do not know what format they are. Let's see how many partitions are there in fact on that USB drive that I have just inserted. So I go right click on the Windows Start menu and then Disk Management. And it shows me that disk 1 is the removable USB 28 gigabytes drive and does not have two partitions, instead it has three partitions. So how do we format this entire USB disk as it is with all of its partitions? All of the partitions should disappear and be replaced with, for instance, a one NTFS partition. So let's see how far we can get using the graphical user interface. Delete volume. Okay, so hopefully we can do it like this. Delete all of the volumes and then create a new partition and then format that. But then, as you can see, the context menu does not allow me to delete this volume or this volume. In here it shows a strange context menu. So at least in situations like this, when we cannot easily format an entire USB disk from the Windows graphical user interface disk management, a good alternative and the alternative that always works is to use the Windows command line to format the entire disk G in this case. So disk 1. So I have Mozilla Firefox installed, the web browser. I went to Google, I have searched for Windows command line format USB. Let's see some of the results. But the steps that I did previously and I expect to be presented in the resulting web pages are these ones. So disk part, list disk, select disk, format, clean, so this thing. Let's put them side by side. Let's start a command prompt, so cmd.exe, but elevated as administrator. So I started the start menu, right, I wrote cmd. As best match, the application command prompt appears, so cmd.exe, right click on it, run as administrator. My user can be elevated as an administrator, that's why the user account control prompt just asked me to press a button. If the current Windows user is not elevatable as an administrator, then the UAC prompt, user account control prompt, will ask for user and password. Okay, and you can see in the title bar of cmd.exe that it says administrator : so that means cmd.exe is elevated as an administrator. Okay, so the name of the Windows application executable that we're going to use is diskpart. where. So we use the where command line, which is the equivalent of the which Linux command line. It searches for the string that I gave it, so diskpart, in all of the directories that are available in the environment variable path. And it found diskpart.exe in the very first directory, separated by semicolon inside of the environment variable path. And the extension is also from an environment variable. Okay, so this just shows us that diskpart is part of the Windows operating system. This is a very clean Windows 11 Pro virtual machine, so diskpart is available at all times. So let's start diskpart. Okay, list disk. So there's two disks. Disk 0, which is this row, and disk 1, which is this row. Disk 0 is the main storage of this, the main disk of this operating system, so 249 gigabytes. And then disk 1 is removable USB and 28 gigabytes. So we want to use disk 1, not disk 0, so be extra careful what you're doing here. Don't mess up other important disks. How do we use this thing? Okay, so we're inside this part, which is a command line executable, REPL, read, evaluate, print loop, so similar to a shell. And this waits for us to give it diskpart specific commands. One was list disk, so we have two disks. We need to make sure we're using disk 1. And then in here says select disk and number. So select disk, and in our case it's disk 1. So as shown in this screenshot, the disk number starts with 0. So disk 0, disk 1, disk 0, disk 1. That's why we say select disk 1. Okay. Then there's list partition in order to make sure that list volume. Volume. No. So we're on disk 1. I do not know how to list disk. So list disk lists all of the disks. This might be USB sticks, DVD drives, hard disks, SSDs. List volume tries to list partitions from all of the disks. Okay, this is what we want. List partition, display a list of partitions of the selected disk. I'm not sure how to interpret this, but what I want to confirm again is that we've selected the correct disk when we did select disk 1 Are we in the correct spot? We do not want to be in this row, we want to be in this row. When we go list partition, it says that there's 3 partitions, which is not unique to the disk 1, because also disk 0 has 3 partitions. Maybe by the sizes we can see, so there's a 3 gigabytes partition, then a 5 megabytes partition, and then I'm not sure what this thing is, so resembles strongly what happens on disk 1. Let's select disk 0 and then run a list partition to make sure that it's really clear that disk 0 is this one. Select disk 0, and then with up arrow key we go back in history, the history of commands, we go list partition, and now it shows 4 partitions. And the sizes are 100 megabyte, 249 gigabytes, and 757 megabytes. So indeed, when we do select disk 0, this disk is selected, and when we do select disk 1, this is selected. So let's go select disk, where are you? 1, and this is the command that we're after, which is clean, which will delete, I don't know, maybe all of the bytes on this disk, or at least the partition table. Okay, we can immediately see in disk management on row 1 that there are 0 partitions, 2 were left, and now there's 0, and all of the space is unallocated to 883 gigabytes. We can even stop right here and do the rest of the operations from the disk management, from the graphical user interface. But we can also do the rest of the steps from the command line. So once there are 0 partitions on the USB disk, we want to create as many partitions as needed. Usually you create just 1. So this is the command line, create partition primary, if that works. So create partition primary. We can see now that there's a partition in disk management on the row for disk 1. So there's 0 free space right now, but then the partition does not yet have a file system type. So what we want to do is format NTFS but quick, which I do not know how to do. Format, help, format. So this is the syntax. The commands inside diskpart are case insensitive, so you can write them either uppercase or lowercase or in a mixed case. I'm going to go with lowercase because it's easier for me to type it. Format, fs means file system, so we're at this command line, and in here on the penultimate line. So fs, ntfs, this is one of the 2 possibilities in Windows, but NTFS is the default Windows file system. It supports large files, so it's the default. You should use this in your USB sticks. We're not going to assign it a label, or maybe we will. Let's do it. label, and we're going to go with the size of the thing, which is, I don't know, 32 gigabytes. And then quick. I'm not sure what compress means. Files created on the new volume will be compressed by default. No. So not compress. If you do not specify quick, formatting could take minutes, but if you specify quick, it will take seconds. So again, the command line is format, which means not sure what it does. I'm not sure how it selects the correct partition to format. We've created a partition in here when we went create partition primary. And I'm not sure how it knew which of the partitions on the current disk 1, it should format with file system NTFS. Okay, we can see the label in the left-hand side of the drive letter. So the drive letter is F colon. On the left-hand side, we can see 32 gigabytes. And we can see its file system NTFS inside of the graphical user interface tool for managing disks, which is named disk management. Okay, assign is just for assigning a drive letter, which we already have. We have F colon. Okay, and there's no apply step. Whenever you run one command, everything is done. Whereas other formatting tools might allow you to create a partition, format it, but not do anything until you run the apply command. But diskpart, it does. Once you give it a command line, it fully does what it should do. There's no commit step. Okay, we can exit. And now let's look at the partition in Windows File Explorer. So has the correct label, has a drive letter assigned. Let's see if we can create a directory in here. We can. Let's see if we can create a file in here. We can. Okay, and at the end we can even unmount it like this, eject data traveler. Okay, so we had a stubborn USB disk, which was actually a Linux ISO written to that disk, so it had 3 partitions. Windows could not assign drive letters to all of 3 partitions, just to 2. Windows did not have file system support for those partitions, could not see what was inside, and then Windows Disk Management could not delete all 3 drives, all 3 partitions by pressing right click on the partition in Disk Management and going delete. So I was forced to use the command line tool that exists in Windows, which is diskpart. Inside of diskpart, I have listed the disks. The one I'm interested in, I know it by size, it's 28 gigabytes disk 1. I can also see it in the disk management graphical user interface application, says disk 1 in here. I made sure it's really disk 1 by running list partition, and I saw that there's 3 partitions with sizes that are small and similar to what I see in disk management. whereas the other disk 0, had huge partitions, not 3 but 4, and with sizes of 249 gigabytes, which totally cannot fit on a 32 gigabyte USB disk. So now I'm confident to go select disk 1 inside of diskpart, and then the most important command line, which is clean, deletes all of the partition tables on this disk. Maybe it also writes some random 0 bytes. So at the end of the clean operation, the disk has no partitions and all of the disk space is free, not allocated to any partition. Then I create just one partition, probably the partition table is MBR, that's why it says create partition primary, I'm not exactly sure. And then I went with the correct format command line, which is similar to the one in the example from the help. So I went help format to see the help for the command line format. This help ends with 2 examples. I used the first example, so the penultimate line in the help. Format fs equals the NTFS. Label, I gave it a name. If the label has spaces in name, you must surround the name in double quotes. Since my label text does not have any spaces, I could omit the double quotes. Then I want it to be quick, otherwise it takes minutes. In quick mode it takes seconds, and I do not want compress enabled. Then I ran a sign, which was not really needed because Windows has automatically assigned the drive letter G : to this new partition, and exit to exit this part. At this point, disk management sees the removable USB disk correctly, just one partition, type NTFS, label 32 GB, and I could also open the G : disk partition in Windows File Manager. I could create directories and files. The directories are there, the content of the file is available, and as a last step I can unmount the USB disk and use it, which I can do it from the system tray, right click and eject. Okay, and now it has disappeared, the USB disk has disappeared from the list of from disk management, graphical user interface application, and you can use your USB disk to transfer files. So this was it. Thank you.